Marcus Williams stood outside the big glass doors of the Riverside Concert Hall. His hands were shaking a little. Not from the cold morning air, but from being nervous. Today was his first day at a new job. He was 19 years old and really needed this work. The building in front of him was huge and beautiful. It had tall white columns and fancy stonework. Rich people in nice clothes walked up the wide steps. Marcus looked down at his own clothes. He wore old jeans and a simple white shirt. His shoes were clean but worn out. He felt very different from everyone else. Marcus took a deep breath and walked through the doors. Inside, everything was even more amazing. The ceiling was very high with beautiful paintings. Big chandeliers hung down and made sparkles of light everywhere. The floor was made of shiny marble that reflected his face when he looked down. A woman in a dark blue suit walked up to him. She had a clipboard in her hands and looked very busy. "Are you Marcus Williams?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said quietly. "I'm Mrs. Peterson, the building manager. Follow me. I'll show you what you need to do." Mrs. Peterson walked fast through the halls. Marcus hurried to keep up with her. She showed him where the cleaning supplies were kept. There were mops, buckets, vacuum cleaners, and bottles of soap and polish. Everything was very organized and clean. "You will clean the lobby, the bathrooms, the offices, and the concert hall," Mrs. Peterson said. She gave him a list written on paper. "You start work at 6 in the morning and finish at 2 in the afternoon. Sometimes you might need to stay later if we have special events." Marcus nodded and looked at the list. It was a lot of work, but he was happy to have a job. Back home, his grandmother was sick and needed medicine. The medicine cost a lot of money. His grandmother had raised him since he was little. His parents died in a car accident when he was 7 years old. His grandmother was the only family he had left. "The most important room is the concert hall," Mrs. Peterson continued. "Famous musicians perform there. Everything must be perfect. Never touch the piano unless you are cleaning it, and be very careful when you clean it." She led him through another set of doors. Marcus stopped walking and just stared. The concert hall was the most beautiful room he had ever seen. There were hundreds of red velvet seats arranged in neat rows. Balconies wrapped around the sides with more seats. But what made Marcus stop breathing was the piano. It sat in the center of the stage under bright lights. The piano was black and shiny like a mirror. It was much bigger than any piano Marcus had ever seen. Even from far away, he could tell it was special. Very expensive and very beautiful. "That's a Steinway grand piano," Mrs. Peterson said when she saw him staring. "It cost more money than most people make in 5 years. Only the best musicians in the world get to play it." Marcus wanted to walk closer to the piano, but Mrs. Peterson was already moving toward the exit. "Come on. I'll show you the rest of the building." The rest of the morning went by quickly. Mrs. Peterson showed him how to clean the bathrooms, how to vacuum the carpets, and how to polish the wood furniture. She gave him a uniform to wear. It was a gray shirt and gray pants with his name written on a patch. When Mrs. Peterson left, Marcus started his work. He began in the lobby, mopping the marble floors. People walked by him going to meetings or rehearsals. Most of them did not look at him. He was just the cleaning person to them. But Marcus did not mind. He was used to being invisible. As he worked, Marcus could hear music coming from different rooms. Someone was playing violin in one room. A woman was singing opera in another room. The sounds mixed together and filled the building with beauty. Marcus had always loved music, but he had never been in a place where music was everywhere. Around lunchtime, Marcus went back to clean the concert hall. Most of the people had left for lunch, so the big room was quiet. Marcus walked slowly down the aisle between the seats. His footsteps echoed in the empty space. When he reached the stage, he stopped and looked up at the piano. It was even more beautiful up close. The wood was so shiny he could see his reflection in it. The keys were pure white and black, arranged in perfect order. Marcus remembered his grandmother playing piano at their old church. Her hands would dance across the keys and beautiful music would fill the room. She had tried to teach Marcus when he was younger, but they could not afford a piano. Instead, she would draw piano keys on a piece of paper and show him where to put his fingers. "Music is in your heart, Marcus," she used to say. "You don't need an expensive piano to have music in your heart." When Marcus was 16, he found an old electronic keyboard at a yard sale. Half the keys did not work and it only had 2 sounds, but Marcus bought it with money from his job at a grocery store. He taught himself to play using library books and videos he watched on old computers at school. Now, standing next to this magnificent piano, Marcus felt something deep in his chest. It was like hunger, but not for food. It was hunger for music. He wanted to touch the keys and hear what this beautiful instrument sounded like. But he remembered Mrs. Peterson's words. He was not allowed to touch the piano except to clean it, so Marcus got his cleaning cloth and very carefully wiped the dust from the piano bench. He cleaned the music stand and polished the wood until it gleamed. When he finished cleaning the concert hall, Marcus sat in one of the red seats and looked at the stage. He imagined what it would feel like to sit at that piano bench. What would it feel like to press those perfect keys? What kind of music would come out? Marcus shook his head and stood up. He had work to finish and rent to pay. Dreams were nice, but they did not put food on the table or buy medicine for his grandmother. As he walked toward the exit, Marcus heard the piano make a sound. He turned around quickly, but no one was there. It must have been his imagination. Or maybe it was the building settling. Old buildings made strange noises sometimes, but deep in his heart, Marcus felt like the piano was calling to him. Like it was waiting for someone to bring it to life with music. As he turned off the lights and closed the doors, Marcus made a promise to himself. Someday he would find a way to play that piano. Someday he would make music that would fill this beautiful hall. He just did not know that someday would come much sooner than he thought. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus started working at the Riverside Concert Hall. He had learned the building well. He knew which rooms got dirty faster and which ones stayed clean. He knew the schedule of all the musicians and staff. Most importantly, he had learned when the building was completely empty. Every night, the last person left by 9 o'clock. The security guard, Mr. Johnson, would lock the front doors and then sit in his small office near the entrance. Mr. Johnson was a kind old man who often fell asleep in his chair while watching television. The building became very quiet after 9 o'clock. Marcus usually finished his regular cleaning by 8:30. Mrs. Peterson had told him he could leave when his work was done. But Marcus had started staying later. He told himself it was to do extra cleaning and make sure everything was perfect. But the real reason was the piano. Every day, Marcus thought about the beautiful Steinway grand piano. When he cleaned the concert hall, he would look at it and remember his grandmother's hands moving across piano keys. He could almost hear music in his head. Sometimes, when no one was around, he would sit on the piano bench for just a minute. He never touched the keys, but he would put his hands in position like his grandmother had taught him. On this particular Tuesday night, Marcus finished mopping the lobby floor. The building was quiet except for the sound of Mr. Johnson's television coming from the security office. Marcus put away his cleaning supplies and got ready to leave. But instead of walking toward the exit, he found himself walking toward the concert hall. Marcus opened the doors very quietly. The stage lights were turned down low, but they still made the piano shine like a jewel. The empty seats looked like they were waiting for an audience. Marcus walked down the aisle slowly, his heart beating faster with each step. When he reached the stage, Marcus climbed the steps. The piano was even more beautiful up close. He could see his reflection in the shiny black wood. The keys seemed to glow in the soft light. Marcus looked around the empty hall. He listened carefully for any sounds. All he could hear was the quiet hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of Mr. Johnson's television. Marcus knew he should not touch the piano, but something inside him was stronger than fear. He sat down on the piano bench and lifted the cover that protected the keys. The keys were perfect. White and black in exact order like teeth in a giant smile. Marcus put his hands in position the way his grandmother had taught him. His fingers were shaking a little. Very gently, Marcus pressed one key. The sound that came out was the most beautiful thing he had ever heard. It was rich and deep and pure. Nothing like the broken electronic keyboard he practiced on at home. This sound seemed to fill the entire hall and wrap around him like a warm blanket. Marcus pressed another key, then another. Each note was perfect and clear. He played a simple scale, the way his grandmother had shown him on paper when he was young. The sounds floated up to the high ceiling and came back down like magic. For the first time in months, Marcus felt truly happy. All his worries about money and his grandmother's illness seemed far away. There was only the music and the feeling of the keys under his fingers. Marcus began to play a song his grandmother used to hum while she cooked dinner. It was a slow, sad song about missing someone you love. Marcus did not know the real name of the song, but his grandmother called it Missing You Blues. As Marcus played, He thought about his grandmother and how much he loved her. The piano seemed to understand his feelings. Each note came out exactly the way Marcus felt it should sound. When he played the sad parts, the piano sounded like it was crying. When he played the hopeful parts, the piano sounded like sunshine. Marcus played for about 10 minutes. When he finished the song, he sat quietly and listened to the last note fade away in the empty hall. He had never felt anything like this before. It was like the piano and he were having a conversation without words. Suddenly, Marcus heard a sound from somewhere in the building. He quickly closed the piano cover and stood up. His heart was beating very fast. If someone caught him playing the piano, he would lose his job, and he needed this job to pay for his grandmother's medicine. Marcus listened carefully. The sound did not come again. It was probably just the old building making noise, but Marcus knew he should leave. He had been taking a big risk. As Marcus walked toward the exit, he looked back at the piano one more time. Tomorrow, he promised himself. Tomorrow night he would come back and play again. Just for a few minutes. The next night, Marcus did come back. And the night after that, soon it became a routine. Every night after his cleaning was done, Marcus would go to the concert hall and play the piano for 20 or 30 minutes. He was always very careful to listen for sounds and to stop if anyone was around. Marcus began to play more difficult songs. He remembered pieces his grandmother had hummed and tried to play them on the piano. He also began to make up his own music. When he felt sad about his grandmother being sick, he would play sad music. When he felt happy about having a job, he would play happy music. The piano seemed to help Marcus express feelings he could not put into words. When he played, it was like his heart was speaking directly through the music. He felt less alone and less worried about the future. Marcus also noticed that his playing was getting better. The broken keyboard at home had taught him finger positions and basic songs, but playing on the concert hall piano was teaching him about dynamics and expression. He learned how to make the piano whisper softly or sing loudly. He learned how to make chords that sounded like emotions. Sometimes Marcus would imagine that there was an audience in the red velvet seats. He would play for these imaginary people and bow when he finished. In his imagination, the audience would clap and smile and ask for more music. But Marcus knew this was just a dream. He was a janitor, not a musician. Real musicians had expensive education and fancy clothes and important connections. Marcus had none of those things. He had only his love for music and an old grandmother who believed in him. Still, those late-night sessions with the piano became the best part of Marcus's day. No matter how tired he was from cleaning or how worried he was about money, the music made everything better. For 30 minutes each night, Marcus could be the musician he dreamed of being. Marcus was careful to clean the piano keys after he played, so no one would know someone had been using it. He made sure to put everything back exactly the way it was. He thought his secret was safe. But Marcus did not know that sound travels in strange ways through old buildings. He did not know that beautiful music can reach ears even when you think no one is listening, and he did not know that his late-night piano playing was about to change his life in ways he could never imagine. As Marcus walked home that night, humming the tune he had just played, he felt hopeful about tomorrow. Tomorrow night he would play again. The piano would be waiting for him, ready to help him turn his feelings into music. It had become his secret friend, his escape from a difficult world. Marcus did not know that tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow his secret would not be safe anymore. 2 months had passed since Marcus first touched the piano keys. What started as a few stolen minutes had become the most important part of his day. Every night after finishing his cleaning duties, Marcus would make his way to the concert hall for what he called his secret sessions. Marcus had become very smart about his routine. He knew exactly when Mr. Johnson, the security guard, would fall asleep in his chair. He knew which floorboards creaked and how to avoid them. He knew how to move through the building like a ghost, leaving no trace of where he had been. The piano had become like an old friend to Marcus. He knew the feel of every key and the exact sound each one made. He had learned that if he pressed the keys very gently, the sound would be soft and would not travel far through the building. But if he pressed them firmly, the music would fill the entire hall with rich, beautiful sound. Marcus's playing had improved greatly over these 2 months. The broken keyboard at home had taught him the basics, but the concert hall piano was teaching him to be an artist. He learned to make the music speak with emotion. When he played happy songs, the notes danced and sparkled. When he played sad songs, the music seemed to cry real tears. On this cold Friday night in November, Marcus finished his cleaning early. Mrs. Peterson had left at 5 o'clock for a long weekend. Most of the staff had gone home early too. The building felt extra quiet and peaceful. Marcus made his usual careful journey to the concert hall. He opened the doors slowly and slipped inside. The stage lights were dimmed low, creating a warm golden glow around the piano. Marcus always felt like he was entering a magical place when he stepped into this room. Tonight, Marcus wanted to try something new. Over the past week, he had been thinking about his grandmother and all the stories she told him about playing piano at church when she was young. She had described songs that made people cry and songs that made them clap their hands with joy. Marcus sat at the piano bench and placed his hands on the keys. He closed his eyes and thought about his grandmother. He remembered her voice when she hummed while cooking dinner. He remembered the way her face looked when she talked about music, like she was remembering something wonderful from long ago. Marcus began to play a melody that came from deep in his heart. It was not a song he had learned from a book or heard on the radio. It was a song that seemed to come from his memories and feelings about his grandmother. The melody started soft and gentle, like his grandmother's voice when she sang him to sleep as a child. As Marcus played, the melody grew and changed. It became the sound of his grandmother's laughter. Then it became the sound of her footsteps in their small apartment. The music painted pictures of Sunday mornings when his grandmother would make pancakes and hum while she cooked. Marcus let his hands move across the keys without thinking too much about what he was doing. The music seemed to flow through him like water. He played about his grandmother's strength when times were hard. He played about her kindness to neighbors who needed help. He played about her faith that everything would work out fine, even when things looked impossible. The song grew bigger and more complex. Marcus used both hands to create harmony. His left hand played deep, rich notes that sounded like his grandmother's wisdom. His right hand played higher notes that sounded like her hope and joy. Together they created music that told the story of a woman who had lost much but never lost her love for life. As the song reached its peak, Marcus played with all the emotion in his heart. He thought about how his grandmother had sacrificed everything to raise him after his parents died. He thought about how she worked 2 jobs to pay for his school clothes and food. He thought about how she never complained, even when her arthritis made her hands hurt too much to play piano anymore. The music filled the entire concert hall. It rose up to the high ceiling and bounced off the walls. It wrapped around the empty seats like invisible arms, giving comfort to anyone who might be listening. Marcus felt like he was pouring his whole soul into the piano, and the piano was taking his feelings and turning them into something beautiful. When the song finally came to an end, Marcus let the last note ring in the air until it faded completely. He sat very still, feeling like he had just shared something very personal and important. His eyes were wet with tears, but they were good tears. Tears of love and gratitude for his grandmother. Marcus wiped his eyes and looked around the empty hall. For a moment he imagined that his grandmother was sitting in one of the red velvet seats, smiling and clapping her hands. In his imagination she stood up and called out, "That was beautiful, Marcus. Play it again!" Marcus smiled and began to play the song again, but this time he played it differently. This time he played it like his grandmother was really there listening. He played with confidence and joy, not hiding his talent but celebrating it. As he played, Marcus began to think about something his grandmother had told him many years ago. She had said, "Music is not just sounds, Marcus. Music is feelings shared between hearts. When you play music with love, it reaches people in places words cannot touch." Marcus had been too young to understand what she meant then, but now sitting at this magnificent piano in this beautiful hall, he finally understood. Music was not just about pressing the right keys at the right time. Music was about taking the feelings in your heart and sharing them with the world. When Marcus finished playing the second time, he felt different somehow. Stronger and more sure of himself. He realized that these secret sessions were not just about having fun or escaping from his problems. They were about discovering who he really was inside. Marcus looked at his hands resting on the piano keys. These were the same hands that mopped floors and cleaned bathrooms every day. But when they touched these keys, they became something more. They became instruments of beauty and emotion and art. For the first time since starting work at the concert hall, Marcus allowed himself to dream a bigger dream. What if he could somehow become a real musician? What if he could play music that would make people feel the way his grandmother's stories made him feel? What if he could use music to bring comfort and joy to others, the way his grandmother had brought comfort and joy to him? Marcus knew these were big dreams for someone like him. He had no formal training and no money for music school. He was just a janitor who happened to love music. But sitting in this beautiful hall with the sound of his own music still echoing in his ears, Marcus felt like anything might be possible. Marcus played one more song before leaving that night. It was a simple melody, but he played it with all the hope and determination in his heart. It was a song about dreams and the courage to pursue them, even when the odds seemed impossible. As Marcus carefully closed the piano and prepared to leave, he made himself a promise. He would continue these secret sessions, not just because they made him happy, but because they were helping him become the person he was meant to be. He would practice and learn and grow, even if no one ever heard his music except the empty seats and the sleeping security guard. Marcus walked home that night feeling like he was walking on air. He had discovered something important about himself, something that gave his life new meaning and purpose. Tomorrow night he would be back at the piano, ready to continue his musical journey. He had no idea that tomorrow would bring the beginning of the end of his secret. But for now, Marcus was content to dream and plan and look forward to another night of making beautiful music in his magical private concert hall. It was a Tuesday night in December, and snow was falling outside the windows of the Riverside Concert Hall. Marcus had been having his secret piano sessions for almost 3 months now. He had become very confident in his routine and felt completely safe during his late-night practice time. Tonight felt different from the beginning. Marcus noticed that Mr. Johnson, the security guard, seemed more alert than usual. Instead of falling asleep in his chair right away, Mr. Johnson kept getting up and walking around the building. Marcus could hear his footsteps echoing through the halls even after 10 o'clock. Marcus waited in the supply closet where he kept his cleaning equipment. He listened carefully to the sounds of the building. Usually by this time everything was quiet except for the hum of the heating system. But tonight he could still hear Mr. Johnson moving around, checking doors and windows. Marcus looked at his watch. It was already 10:30. He usually started playing by 10 o'clock and finished by 11. If he waited much longer, he would not have time for his music. The thought of going home without playing the piano made Marcus feel sad and restless. Finally, around 10:45, the building became quiet. Marcus could hear the familiar sound of Mr. Johnson's television from the security office. Marcus waited 5 more minutes to be extra safe, then began his careful journey to the concert hall. The hall seemed longer and darker than usual. Every small sound made Marcus stop and listen. A pipe creaking in the wall, the heating system turning on, the wind blowing against the windows. All these normal sounds seemed louder and more threatening tonight. When Marcus reached the concert hall, he paused with his hand on the door handle. Something felt wrong, but he could not figure out what it was. The building was quiet. Mr. Johnson's television was playing. Everything seemed normal. Marcus shook his head and told himself he was being silly. Marcus opened the door to the concert hall and slipped inside. The stage lights were dimmed as usual, creating that magical golden glow around the piano. The sight of the beautiful instrument made Marcus forget his worries. This was his special place, his escape from the world. Marcus walked down the aisle and climbed onto the stage. He sat at the piano bench and lifted the cover over the keys. The black and white keys seemed to smile at him in the soft light. Marcus placed his hands in position and began to play. Tonight, Marcus wanted to practice a new song he had been working on. It was more complicated than anything he had played before, with difficult chord changes and a melody that moved quickly between his left and right hands. The song told the story of snow falling on a quiet city, and Marcus tried to make the piano sound like snowflakes dancing in the wind. Marcus was so focused on getting the difficult parts right that he did not notice the sounds outside the concert hall. He did not hear the footsteps in the corridor. He did not hear the door handle turning slowly. He was lost in his music, completely absorbed in creating beautiful sounds. The song reached a particularly challenging section where both hands had to play very fast, moving up and down the keyboard like snow swirling in a storm. Marcus was concentrating so hard that sweat formed on his forehead, despite the cool air in the hall. Just as Marcus reached the climax of the song, With music filling the entire space, he heard something that made his blood turn cold. The sound of a door creaking open behind him. Marcus stopped playing immediately. His hands froze over the keys. His heart began beating so fast he thought it might explode. Very slowly, Marcus turned his head to look toward the back of the hall. There, silhouetted in the doorway, was the figure of Mr. Johnson. The security guard was holding a flashlight, and he was looking directly at the stage where Marcus sat. For a moment, neither Marcus nor Mr. Johnson moved. They stared at each other across the dark concert hall like two animals surprised in the forest. Marcus felt like he could not breathe. His dream job, his grandmother's medicine, his entire future seemed to be crashing down around him. Then, without thinking, Marcus did something that surprised even himself. Instead of standing up and trying to explain, Marcus rolled off the piano bench and crawled quickly toward the edge of the stage. There was a narrow space between the stage and the first row of seats called the orchestra pit. Marcus had cleaned this area many times and knew he could hide there. Marcus squeezed into the orchestra pit just as Mr. Johnson's flashlight beam swept across the stage. Marcus pressed himself flat against the floor, trying to make himself as small as possible. His heart was beating so loud he was sure Mr. Johnson would hear it. "Hello?" Mr. Johnson called out. "Is someone in here?" Marcus held his breath. The orchestra pit was dark and narrow, filled with music stands and chairs that provided some cover. But if Mr. Johnson came down to investigate, Marcus would surely be caught. Marcus heard Mr. Johnson's footsteps as the security guard walked down the aisle toward the stage. The beam of the flashlight danced around the room, lighting up sections of seats and walls. Marcus pressed himself deeper into the shadows of the orchestra pit. "I know I heard music," Mr. Johnson said to himself. "Beautiful piano music. But where did it come from?" The flashlight beam swept over the stage, lighting up the piano bench where Marcus had been sitting just moments before. The piano cover was still open, and Marcus realized with horror that this was evidence someone had been playing. Mr. Johnson climbed onto the stage and walked over to the piano. He shined his flashlight on the keys and the bench. Then he looked around the stage, behind the curtains and in the wings where scenery was stored. "Very strange," Mr. Johnson muttered. "I could have sworn I heard someone playing piano. Maybe I'm getting old and hearing things." Marcus remained perfectly still in the orchestra pit. A music stand was poking into his ribs and his left leg was starting to cramp. But he did not dare move even slightly. Above him he could hear Mr. Johnson walking around the stage, still searching. After what felt like hours but was probably only 5 minutes, Mr. Johnson gave up his search. He shined his flashlight around the hall one more time, then walked back up the aisle toward the exit. "Must have been the wind," Marcus heard him say, "or maybe the heat pipes making noise. These old buildings can sound like anything." Marcus heard the door close as Mr. Johnson left the concert hall, but Marcus did not move right away. He stayed hidden in the orchestra pit for another 10 minutes, making sure the security guard was really gone. When Marcus finally crawled out of his hiding place, his whole body was shaking. He had come so close to being caught. If Mr. Johnson had looked down into the orchestra pit, Marcus would have lost his job for sure. And without this job, his grandmother could not afford her medicine. Marcus crept back onto the stage and quickly closed the piano cover. He looked around to make sure everything was exactly as it should be. Then he began his careful journey back through the building to gather his things and leave. As Marcus walked through the dark halls, his mind was racing. Mr. Johnson had definitely heard him playing. The security guard might be more alert from now on, watching and listening for strange sounds. Marcus's secret might not be safe anymore. But even worse than the fear of being caught was the terrible feeling that he might have to give up his piano sessions. For 3 months, these late-night practices had been the best part of Marcus's life. They had given him hope and joy and a sense of purpose. The thought of losing this made Marcus feel like a part of him was dying. When Marcus reached the lobby, he saw Mr. Johnson in the security office, writing something in a logbook. Marcus tried to walk quietly past the office, but Mr. Johnson looked up and saw him. "Marcus," Mr. Johnson called out. "You're working late tonight?" Marcus stopped and tried to look calm even though his heart was still beating fast. "Yes, sir. Just finishing up some extra cleaning." Mr. Johnson studied Marcus's face with curious eyes. "Did you hear anything strange tonight? Like music coming from somewhere in the building?" Marcus felt his mouth go dry. "Music, sir? No, I did not hear any music. Just the usual sounds of the building. Mr. Johnson nodded slowly. I could have sworn I heard someone playing piano in the concert hall. Beautiful music, too. But when I went to check, no one was there. That is strange, sir, Marcus managed to say. Maybe it was the wind or the heating pipes. Maybe, Mr. Johnson said, but he did not sound convinced. Well, you have a good night, Marcus. Be careful walking home in the snow. As Marcus walked home through the falling snow, he felt scared and sad and confused all at the same time. He knew he should probably stop his secret piano sessions. It was too dangerous now. Mr. Johnson would be watching and listening more carefully. But the thought of giving up the piano made Marcus feel empty inside. Music had become such an important part of who he was. How could he go back to just being a janitor who mopped floors and cleaned bathrooms? How could he give up the one thing that made him feel truly alive? Marcus knew he would have to make a choice soon. Safety or music, his job or his dreams. As he trudged through the snow toward his small apartment, Marcus wondered if there was any way to have both. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus's close call with Mr. Johnson. Despite the danger, Marcus could not stay away from the piano. The music had become like food and water to him. He needed it to feel complete and alive. Marcus had changed his routine to be even more careful. He waited until almost midnight before going to the concert hall. He played more softly than before, and he kept his sessions shorter. Most importantly, he had found a better hiding place near the stage in case he needed to disappear quickly again. On this particular Thursday night in January, the building seemed extra quiet. A winter storm was blowing outside, with wind howling around the windows and snow piling up in the streets. Most people had left work early because of the weather warnings. Marcus finished his regular cleaning duties by 9 o'clock. He spent the next 3 hours reading a library book about piano technique and waiting for the building to settle into its deep nighttime quiet. When his watch showed midnight, Marcus began his careful journey to the concert hall. What Marcus did not know was that Elena Rodriguez, the theater's artistic director, was also in the building that night. Elena had been working late in her office on the 3rd floor, reviewing audition recordings for an upcoming show. She was a woman in her 40s with dark hair and kind eyes who had dedicated her life to bringing beautiful music to the community. Elena loved her job, but lately it had become very stressful. The theater was having money problems, and Elena spent most of her time worrying about budgets instead of focusing on music. Tonight, she had stayed late to listen to dozens of recordings from singers and musicians who wanted to perform at the theater. Most of the audition recordings were disappointingly ordinary. The singers had good technique, but their performances felt cold and mechanical. Elena was beginning to lose hope that she would find someone with real passion and emotion for the upcoming show. Elena had been listening to recordings for hours when she decided to take a break. Her ears were tired and her heart felt heavy with disappointment. She stood up from her desk and walked to the window of her office, looking out at the snow falling in the empty streets. As Elena stood at the window, she heard something that made her stop breathing. Floating up from somewhere in the building was the sound of piano music. But this was not just any piano music. This was something extraordinary. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, full of emotion and depth. It sounded like someone pouring their heart and soul into every note. Elena had been around professional musicians her entire career, but she had rarely heard anything this moving and genuine. Elena listened carefully, trying to figure out where the music was coming from. It seemed to be coming from the direction of the concert hall, but that was impossible. The hall was locked and no one was scheduled to practice tonight. The music continued growing more complex and emotionally powerful. Elena could hear pain and hope and love all mixed together in the melody. Whoever was playing had incredible natural talent and a deep understanding of how music could express human emotions. Elena's curiosity overcame her caution. She quietly left her office and began walking toward the concert hall. The music grew clearer as she got closer, confirming that it was indeed coming from the main performance space. Elena reached the doors to the concert hall and paused. She could hear the music clearly now, and it was even more beautiful than she had thought. The pianist was playing something that sounded like an original composition, something Elena had never heard before. Very carefully, Elena opened one of the doors just a crack and peered inside. What she saw took her breath away. There, alone on the big stage under the soft lights, sat a young man at the concert hall's grand piano. Elena recognized him immediately as Marcus, the quiet janitor she had seen around the building. But seeing Marcus at the piano was like seeing a completely different person. Marcus was transformed. His usual nervous, careful demeanor was gone, replaced by confidence and grace. His hands moved across the keys with skill and precision. But more than that, they moved with deep feeling and understanding. Every note seemed to come from his heart. Elena crept quietly into the hall and made her way up to the balcony level, where she could watch without being seen. She sat in one of the balcony seats and listened to Marcus play, hardly believing what she was witnessing. The music Marcus was creating was unlike anything Elena had heard in years of working with professional musicians. It had technical skill, but more importantly, it had soul. It told stories without words. It painted pictures with sound. It made Elena feel emotions she had almost forgotten she could feel. As Elena listened, she found herself crying. Not sad tears, but tears of joy and amazement. This young man, this janitor who mopped floors and cleaned bathrooms, was creating music that touched her heart in ways she had not experienced since she was a child listening to her grandmother play piano. Marcus played several different pieces during the time Elena watched. Some were gentle and soft like lullabies. Others were powerful and dramatic like storms. All of them were beautiful and deeply moving. Elena began to understand that Marcus was not just playing songs he had learned from books. He was creating music from his own experiences and emotions. This was not performance. This was artistic expression of the highest level. During one particularly beautiful section, Elena saw Marcus close his eyes and smile slightly, as if the music was bringing him great happiness. Elena realized that this young man was not playing for an audience or for money or for fame. He was playing because music was part of his soul, because he had to create beauty or he would not feel complete. Elena thought about all the professional musicians she had worked with over the years. Many of them were technically excellent, but few of them played with this kind of pure, honest emotion. Most had been trained to perform correctly, but Marcus was performing truthfully. As Elena continued to watch and listen, she began to feel excited in a way she had not felt in years. Here was the kind of artist she had been searching for without even knowing it. Here was someone who could touch people's hearts and remind them why music mattered. Elena also began to feel sad, because she realized that Marcus was hiding his incredible talent. He was playing alone in an empty hall in the middle of the night, sharing his gift with no one. What circumstances had led this gifted young man to become a janitor instead of a musician? The music session lasted about 40 minutes. When Marcus finished his last piece, he sat quietly for a moment, as if saying goodbye to the piano. Then he carefully closed the piano cover and began to clean up any evidence that he had been there. Elena watched Marcus leave the stage and exit the hall. She remained sitting in the balcony for a long time after he was gone, thinking about what she had witnessed. The echo of his music seemed to hang in the air like a beautiful ghost. Elena's mind was racing with questions and possibilities. How long had Marcus been playing in secret? Where had he learned to play with such skill and emotion? And most importantly, how could she help him share his gift with the world? Elena knew that discovering Marcus was more than just a coincidence. In a building full of professional musicians, the most talented artist turned out to be the person who cleaned the floors. There was something beautiful and meaningful about that. Something that gave Elena hope about the power of music to transcend social boundaries. As Elena finally made her way back to her office, she felt energized and inspired for the first time in months. The stress and worry about budgets and business problems seemed less important now. She had been reminded why she chose to work in music in the first place. Elena sat at her desk and began making notes about what she had heard. She wanted to remember every detail of Marcus's playing so she could figure out the best way to approach him. This was a delicate situation that would require careful thought and planning. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but Elena barely noticed. Her mind was full of beautiful music and exciting possibilities. She had found something precious and rare, and now she had to figure out how to nurture it without destroying it. Elena worked until dawn, not on budgets or business problems, but on plans for how to help a talented young janitor become the artist he was meant to be. For the first time in years, Elena felt like she was about to do something truly important. Marcus had no idea that his secret was no longer a secret. He had no idea that his late-night music sessions had been discovered by someone who could change his life forever. As he walked home through the snow that morning, Marcus was already looking forward to the next night when he could return to his beloved piano. Neither Marcus nor Elena could imagine how much their lives were about to change. The next morning, Marcus arrived at work feeling tired but happy. He had played beautifully the night before, and the music was still echoing in his head as he began his daily cleaning routine. Marcus had no idea that Elena Rodriguez had been watching him from the balcony, or that his secret was no longer safe. Elena had barely slept after discovering Marcus's incredible talent. She spent most of the night thinking about how to approach him without scaring him away. Elena understood that Marcus was taking a big risk by playing the piano without permission. If she handled this situation wrong, Marcus might stop playing altogether, and that would be a terrible loss. Elena decided to wait until the afternoon when most of the staff had gone home. She wanted to talk to Marcus privately, in a place where he would feel safe and not embarrassed. She spent the morning working at her desk, but her mind kept returning to the beautiful music she had heard the night before. Around 3 o'clock, Elena saw Marcus cleaning the hallway outside her office. Her heart started beating faster as she realized this was her chance to talk to him. Elena took a deep breath and stepped out of her office. "Marcus," she called softly. Marcus looked up from his mop bucket with surprise. Elena Rodriguez was one of the most important people in the building, and she had never spoken to him directly before. Marcus quickly stood up straight and tried to look professional. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said nervously. "Could I speak with you for a moment? In private?" Marcus felt his stomach drop. Had he done something wrong? Was he about to lose his job? Marcus followed Elena into her office, his hands shaking slightly as he tried to think of what mistake he might have made. Elena's office was beautiful, with walls covered in photographs of famous musicians and posters from past theater productions. Her desk was covered with sheet music and CDs. Marcus had never been inside this office before, and he felt very out of place. "Please sit down," Elena said, pointing to a comfortable chair across from her desk. Marcus sat down carefully, still trying to figure out why he was there. Elena sat behind her desk and looked at him with kind but serious eyes. "Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth," Elena said gently. "Have you been playing the piano in the concert hall after hours?" Marcus felt like all the air had been sucked out of his lungs. His worst fear was coming true. He had been caught, and now he was going to lose his job. Marcus's face turned red, and he could not look Elena in the eyes. I, Marcus stammered, not knowing what to say. Elena could see how scared Marcus was, and her heart went out to him. She leaned forward and spoke in the kindest voice she could manage. "Marcus, you're not in trouble. I'm not going to fire you or report you to anyone. I just need to know the truth because what I heard last night was the most beautiful music I've experienced in years." Marcus looked up at Elena with surprise and confusion. You heard me playing?" "Yes," Elena said with a warm smile. "I was working late in my office when I heard piano music coming from the concert hall. I went to investigate and I saw you playing. Marcus, your music was absolutely extraordinary." Marcus did not know what to say. He had been so sure he was about to be fired, but Elena seemed genuinely impressed by his playing. This was not what he had expected at all. "I'm sorry," Marcus said quietly. "I know I wasn't supposed to touch the piano. I couldn't help myself. Music is very important to me, and that piano is so beautiful." Elena's heart melted at the honesty and passion in Marcus's voice. She could see that this young man truly loved music, not for money or fame, but for the pure joy of creating something beautiful. "Marcus, you have nothing to apologize for," Elena said. "What you were doing last night was not wrong. It was magical. I need to know more about your musical background. Where did you learn to play like that?" Marcus was still confused and nervous, but Elena's kindness was beginning to put him at ease. Slowly, Marcus began to tell his story. He told Elena about his grandmother who had played piano at church. He told her about learning to play on paper keyboards and broken electronic instruments. He told her about teaching himself from library books and practicing whenever he could find a piano. As Marcus talked, Elena listened with growing amazement. This young man had developed incredible musical talent with almost no formal training and very little access to proper instruments. What Marcus had accomplished was nothing short of remarkable. "Marcus, what I heard last night was not just good amateur playing," Elena said when Marcus finished his story. What I heard was professional-level artistry. You have a natural gift that most musicians would give anything to possess. Marcus shook his head. I'm just a janitor, ma'am. I'm not a real musician. Real musicians go to fancy schools and have expensive training. Elena stood up and walked around her desk to sit in the chair next to Marcus. She wanted him to understand how serious and important this conversation was. Marcus, let me tell something about music, Elena said. I've worked with hundreds of professional musicians over the years. Many of them have impressive degrees and technical training, but very few of them can do what you did last night. Very few of them can make music that touches people's hearts the way your music touched mine. Elena paused and looked directly into Marcus's eyes. Music is not about degrees or fancy schools. Music is about having something important to say and finding a way to say it beautifully. You have that gift, Marcus. You have it in abundance. Marcus felt tears starting to form in his eyes. No one had ever talked to him about his music this way before. His grandmother had always encouraged him, but she was family. Elena was a professional who worked with musicians every day, and she was telling him that his music was special. What you heard last night, Marcus said softly. Those were mostly songs I made up myself. Songs about my grandmother and my life and the things I feel. Elena's eyes widened with excitement. You compose your own music? Marcus, that makes what you're doing even more extraordinary. Original composition is one of the hardest skills in music, and you're doing it naturally. Elena got up and walked to her window, looking out at the concert hall where she had discovered Marcus the night before. She turned back to Marcus with a determined expression. Marcus, I want to help you develop your talent. I want to help you become the musician you're capable of being. But first, I need to know something. What do you want? If you could have any future in music, what would it look like? Marcus thought about the question carefully. It was something he had dreamed about but never dared to say out loud. I would want to write music that makes people feel less alone, Marcus said finally. Music that helps people through difficult times the way my grandmother's music helped me. I would want to create something beautiful that could comfort people and give them hope. Elena smiled widely. This was exactly the kind of answer she had hoped to hear. Marcus was not interested in fame or money. He wanted to use music to help people, to make the world a little better. This was the mark of a true artist. Marcus, I think we can make that dream come true, Elena said, but it's going to require some changes in your life. Are you willing to take some risks and work very hard? Marcus looked at Elena with a mixture of hope and fear. What kind of changes? Elena sat back down and began to explain her ideas. She talked about music lessons and performance opportunities. She talked about scholarships and competitions. She talked about a future where Marcus could share his gift with the world. As Elena spoke, Marcus felt like he was living in a dream. Just yesterday, he had been a janitor who played piano in secret. Now one of the most important people in the music world was offering to help him become a real musician. But Marcus also felt scared. Change was always frightening, especially when you had responsibilities like taking care of a sick grandmother. Marcus explained his concerns about money and his grandmother's medical needs. Elena listened to Marcus's worries with understanding and compassion. She assured him that they would find ways to help him pursue music while still taking care of his responsibilities. Marcus, extraordinary talent like yours is very rare, Elena said. I believe it's my responsibility to help nurture it. But more than that, I believe the world needs to hear your music. You have something special to offer, and it would be wrong to keep it hidden. By the end of their conversation, Marcus felt like his entire life had changed direction. He was still scared and uncertain about the future, but for the first time, he felt like his dreams might actually be possible. As Marcus left Elena's office that afternoon, he carried with him a new sense of hope and purpose. His secret was no longer a secret, but that was okay, because now instead of hiding his talent, he had someone who wanted to help him share it with the world. Marcus could hardly wait to get home and tell his grandmother what had happened. After years of dreaming about music, he was finally going to get the chance to see how far his talent could take him. 2 weeks had passed since Elena's life-changing conversation with Marcus. During this time, Elena had been working behind the scenes to create opportunities for Marcus to develop his musical talent. She had arranged for him to have access to practice rooms during his lunch breaks and had even found him a part-time music theory instructor who was willing to work for very little money. Marcus was making incredible progress. With proper guidance and more time to practice, His natural abilities were flourishing in ways that amazed even Elena. Marcus was like a sponge, absorbing every lesson and technique with enthusiasm and dedication. On this particular Monday morning, Elena was in her office dealing with a crisis that threatened to ruin the theater's most important event of the year. The annual fundraising gala was scheduled for Saturday night, and it was crucial for the theater's financial survival. The gala always featured a special opening performance that set the tone for the entire evening. Elena's phone rang, and she answered it with a heavy heart, already knowing what the caller was going to tell her. "Elena, I'm so sorry," said the voice of David Chen, a famous pianist who was supposed to perform at the gala. "I've been to 3 doctors and they all say the same thing. I have a severe case of pneumonia and cannot travel or perform for at least 2 weeks." Elena closed her eyes and felt her stomach sink. David was not just any pianist. He was internationally known, and was the main reason many wealthy donors had bought tickets to the gala. His performance was supposed to be the highlight of the evening. "David, I understand completely," Elena said, trying to keep her voice calm. "Your health is the most important thing. Please focus on getting better." After Elena hung up the phone, she sat at her desk and stared at the list of gala attendees. 300 of the city's wealthiest and most influential people were coming to the event. These were people who could determine whether the theater survived another year or had to close its doors forever. Elena spent the morning calling every professional musician she knew, trying to find a replacement for David. But it was impossible on such short notice. Every good pianist was already booked for the weekend, and the few who were available did not have the reputation or skill level that the gala required. By noon, Elena was feeling desperate. She had even considered canceling the gala, but that would be a financial disaster for the theater. Elena needed to find a solution, and she needed to find it quickly. Elena was eating a sandwich at her desk when she heard the sound of piano music coming from one of the practice rooms down the hall. She recognized the playing immediately. It was Marcus using his lunch break to practice as he did every day now. Elena stopped chewing and listened carefully to what Marcus was playing. It was one of his own compositions, a piece he called City Rain that painted musical pictures of water falling on busy streets. The music was sophisticated and emotionally moving, exactly the kind of performance that would impress the gala audience. Suddenly, Elena had an idea that was so bold and risky, it made her hands shake. What if Marcus could perform at the gala? What if this young janitor could be the solution to her crisis? Elena knew it was a crazy idea. Marcus had never performed in front of an audience before. He had no formal training or professional experience. The gala guests were expecting a world-class artist, not a 19-year-old janitor who had learned to play piano by himself. But as Elena continued to listen to Marcus's playing, she realized that his music was exactly what the gala needed. It was authentic and heartfelt in a way that would touch people's hearts and remind them why supporting the arts was important. Elena finished her sandwich quickly and walked down the hall to the practice room where Marcus was playing. She knocked gently on the door and waited for the music to stop before entering. Marcus looked up from the piano with a smile. "Hello, Mrs. Rodriguez. How did the morning meetings go?" Elena sat down in the chair next to the piano. She looked at Marcus seriously, and he could tell that something important was about to happen. "Marcus, I need to tell you about a situation we're facing," Elena began. "Our opening performer for Saturday's gala has become very sick and cannot perform. This is a major problem because the gala is our most important fundraising event of the year." Marcus nodded, waiting to hear how this affected him. Elena took a deep breath before continuing. "Marcus, I want to ask you to do something that might seem impossible. I want you to perform at the gala as our opening act." Marcus stared at Elena with his mouth open. For a moment, he could not speak at all. When he finally found his voice, it came out as a whisper. "Me? Perform at the gala? Mrs. Rodriguez, I think you might be making a mistake. I'm just a janitor. I've never performed for anyone except empty rooms." Elena leaned forward and looked Marcus directly in the eyes. "Marcus, you are not just anything. You are one of the most talented musicians I have ever encountered. Your music has the power to move people and inspire them. That's exactly what we need for the gala." Marcus shook his head, feeling overwhelmed by the idea. "But the people at the gala? They're expecting someone famous, someone professional. They'll be disappointed when they see me." Elena smiled gently. "Marcus, do you know what those people really want? They want to feel something meaningful. They want to be reminded why music and art matter in their lives. Your music can do that better than any famous performer because your music comes from real experience and genuine emotion. Marcus stood up and walked to the window of the practice room. Outside, he could see people walking by on the street, going about their normal lives. In just 5 days, he might be performing for some of the most important people in the city. "I'm scared, Mrs. Rodriguez," Marcus admitted. "What if I make mistakes? What if I forget how to play? What if people don't like my music?" Elena understood Marcus's fears because she had felt the same way before her first major performance many years ago. She walked over and stood next to him at the window. "Marcus, fear is normal before any important performance. Even world-famous musicians get nervous. But you cannot let fear stop you from sharing your gift with the world." Elena paused and thought about how to explain the importance of this opportunity. "Marcus, this gala is not just about raising money for the theater. It's about showing people that art and music can change lives. Your story, your journey from janitor to musician, represents everything we believe in. You are proof that talent can come from anywhere, and that music belongs to everyone, not just people with money and connections." Marcus considered Elena's words carefully. He thought about his grandmother and how proud she would be if she could see him performing on a real stage. He thought about all the nights he had played alone in the empty concert hall, dreaming of sharing his music with others. "If I say yes," Marcus asked quietly, "what would I need to do to get ready?" Elena's face lit up with excitement. "First, we would arrange for you to have intensive practice sessions with a professional piano coach. We would also help you select the perfect piece to perform. And most importantly, we would make sure you feel confident and prepared." Marcus turned away from the window and looked at the piano where he had been practicing. This instrument had become his friend and teacher over the past few months. Maybe it was time to let it help him take the next step in his musical journey. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Marcus said slowly, "if you really believe I can do this, then I want to try. I'm scared, but I'm also excited. This might be my only chance to show people what music means to me." Elena smiled widely and felt tears of joy forming in her eyes. "Marcus, you are going to be absolutely wonderful. This gala is going to be a night that everyone remembers forever." Over the next hour, Elena and Marcus discussed the details of his performance. They talked about what he would wear, how he would be introduced, and what piece of music would be best for the audience. Marcus decided to perform Grandmother's Song, the piece he had written about his grandmother and her influence on his life. It was the most personal and meaningful music he had ever created, and Elena agreed it would be perfect for the gala. As they made their plans, Marcus felt a mixture of terror and excitement that he had never experienced before. In 5 days, he would walk onto the stage of the concert hall, where he had played in secret for so many months. But this time, the seats would be filled with people and the lights would be bright and everyone would be listening to his music. Marcus knew this performance could change his life forever. If he succeeded, doors would open for him that he had never dreamed possible. If he failed, he might lose his confidence and never want to perform again. But as scary as the risk was, Marcus knew he had to take it. This was his chance to honor his grandmother's memory and share the gift she had helped him develop. This was his chance to prove that music truly belonged to everyone. Elena shook Marcus's hand as they finished their planning session. "Marcus, you are about to embark on an incredible adventure. Trust your talent, trust your heart, and trust the music that lives inside you." As Marcus walked back to his cleaning duties that afternoon, he felt like he was floating above the ground. In 5 days, the janitor would become a performer, and nothing would ever be the same again. Saturday evening arrived faster than Marcus had thought possible. The 5 days between Elena's invitation and the gala had been a whirlwind of intensive practice sessions, coaching lessons, and preparation. Marcus had worked with a professional piano instructor who helped him polish his technique and build his confidence. Now, as Marcus stood in the small room behind the concert hall stage, he could hear the sounds of 300 wealthy guests taking their seats in the main hall. The murmur of conversations, the clinking of champagne glasses, and the rustle of expensive clothing created a symphony of anticipation that made Marcus's heart race. Marcus looked at himself in the mirror. Elena had helped him find a proper black suit that fit him perfectly. His hair was neatly combed and his shoes were polished until they shined. He looked like a professional musician, but inside he still felt like the nervous janitor who had cleaned these same floors just hours earlier. Elena knocked on the door and entered the room. She was wearing an elegant blue dress and looked calm and confident, but Marcus could see the excitement in her eyes. "How are you feeling, Marcus?" she asked gently. Marcus took a shaky breath, terrified and excited at the same time. "I keep thinking about all the important people out there and wondering what they'll think of someone like me." Elena sat down next to Marcus and spoke in the same kind voice that had changed his life 2 weeks ago. "Marcus, I want you to remember something. Those people out there are not here to judge you. They're here because they love music and want to support the arts. Your job is not to impress them with who you are. Your job is to share the beautiful music that lives in your heart." Elena handed Marcus a program from the evening's event. Marcus saw his name printed in elegant letters. Opening performance by Marcus Williams, composer and pianist. Seeing his name in print made everything feel real and official. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Marcus said, "I want to thank you for believing in me when I didn't even believe in myself. Whatever happens tonight, you've already changed my life." Elena smiled warmly. "Marcus, you're the one with the talent and the courage. I just opened a door. You're the one who chose to walk through it." From the main hall, Marcus could hear the sound of the audience settling into their seats. The conversations were becoming quieter, which meant the program was about to begin. Elena stood up and straightened her dress. "It's time, Marcus. Are you ready?" Marcus stood up and walked to the piano that had been moved into the waiting room for him to warm up his fingers. He played a few gentle scales and felt the familiar comfort of the keys responding to his touch. The music reminded him that he belonged here, that this was what he was meant to do. "I'm ready," Marcus said with more confidence than he felt. Elena led Marcus through the corridors to the side entrance of the concert hall stage. They could hear the master of ceremonies introducing the evening and welcoming the guests. Marcus peeked through the curtain and saw the hall filled with people in elegant clothing. The lights were bright, and everything looked magical and important. "Ladies and gentlemen," the master of ceremonies announced, "we have a very special opening performance this evening. Please welcome Marcus Williams, a young composer and pianist who represents the heart and soul of what the Riverside Concert Hall stands for." Elena gave Marcus's shoulder an encouraging squeeze. "Go show them what real music sounds like," she whispered. Marcus walked onto the stage and was immediately overwhelmed by the sight before him. Every seat was filled with people looking at him with curiosity and anticipation. The stage lights were so bright that he could only see the first few rows clearly, but he could sense the presence of hundreds of people beyond the lights. Marcus walked to the piano bench and sat down carefully. He adjusted the bench height and placed his hands on the keys. For a moment he felt paralyzed by the enormity of what he was about to do. Then Marcus remembered his grandmother's words from long ago. "Music is not just sounds, Marcus. Music is feeling shared between hearts." Marcus closed his eyes and thought about his grandmother. He thought about all the evenings she had hummed while cooking dinner. He thought about her strength during difficult times and her faith that everything would work out. He thought about the love she had given him and the dreams she had encouraged him to pursue. When Marcus opened his eyes and began to play, all his nervousness disappeared. The first notes of grandmother's song filled the concert hall with warmth and beauty. Marcus forgot about the audience and the lights and the pressure. There was only the music and the story he was telling. The melody began softly like a memory floating back from childhood. Marcus played about Sunday mornings and pancakes and his grandmother's gentle voice singing hymns. The music painted pictures of a small apartment filled with love and hope, despite having very little money. As the song developed, Marcus let his emotions flow through his fingers onto the keys. He played about loss and loneliness after his parents died. He played about his grandmother's sacrifices to raise him in her dreams for his future. He played about the strength that comes from being loved unconditionally. The audience fell completely silent. Even the waiters serving champagne stopped moving and stood still to listen. Marcus's music had captured everyone's attention in a way that surprised even Elena, who was watching from the wings with tears in her eyes. Marcus reached the most emotional section of the song, where he expressed his gratitude for his grandmother's love and his determination to make her proud. His hands moved across the keys with passion and precision, creating harmonies that seemed to speak directly to people's hearts. In the audience, Marcus could not see the faces of the listeners, but he would have been amazed to know what was happening. Tough business executives were wiping tears from their eyes. Wealthy socialites were remembering their own grandmothers and the people who had believed in them. The music was doing exactly what Marcus had always dreamed it could do. It was connecting people to their deepest emotions and making them feel less alone. As the song moved toward its conclusion, Marcus played with all the love and hope in his heart. He played for his grandmother who had given him everything. He played for Elena who had believed in his dreams. He played for everyone who had ever felt like an outsider but still dared to hope for something better. The final notes of Grandmother's song rang out in the concert hall and slowly faded into silence. For a moment, no one moved or made a sound. The audience seemed to be holding its breath, as if they did not want to break the spell that Marcus's music had created. Then, from somewhere in the middle of the hall, one person began to clap. The applause spread quickly through the audience like a wave, growing louder and more enthusiastic with each second. Within moments, the entire audience was on their feet, giving Marcus a standing ovation that seemed to shake the building. Marcus stood up from the piano bench and looked out at the sea of standing, clapping people. He could not believe what he was seeing. These wealthy, sophisticated people were applauding him, a janitor who had learned to play piano in secret. They were not just being polite. They were genuinely moved by his music. The applause continued for what felt like forever. People were not just clapping. They were cheering and calling out words of encouragement. Marcus saw Elena in the wings, applauding and crying at the same time. He had never felt so proud and happy in his entire life. When the applause finally began to quiet down, Marcus bowed deeply to the audience. As he walked off the stage, he was surrounded by people wanting to shake his hand and tell him how much his music had touched them. Elena met Marcus backstage and hugged him tightly. "Marcus, that was absolutely incredible. I have never heard anything more beautiful in my life." Throughout the rest of the evening, people approached Marcus to congratulate him and ask about his background. Several wealthy patrons offered to sponsor his musical education. A famous music school director promised him a full scholarship. Record producers left their business cards and asked to hear more of his compositions. But the moment that meant the most to Marcus came at the end of the evening. An elderly woman approached him with tears in her eyes and said, "Young man, your music reminded me of my own grandmother and how much she loved me. Thank you for that gift." 3 months later, Marcus was no longer working as a janitor. With Elena's help and the support of several gala attendees, he had been accepted into a prestigious music program with a full scholarship. He was studying composition and performance while continuing to develop his natural talent. Marcus also became the Riverside Concert Hall's youngest composer in residence, writing music for the theater's productions and performing regularly for audiences who had come to love his authentic, emotional style. The night of the gala had changed Marcus's life completely, but it had also changed him as a person. He was no longer the shy, uncertain young man who had cleaned floors and hidden his talent. He had become confident in his abilities and proud of his unique musical voice. Marcus never forgot his grandmother or the lessons she had taught him about music and life. Every time he performed, he played with the same love and honesty that she had shown him. And every time he sat at a piano, he remembered that music truly was feelings shared between hearts. The janitor who had been told to clean the stage had instead performed a